Hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. This is Kimberly and Tim Scott. And babe, I gotta say, for those who can't see us right now and listening, you look like a delicious slice of watermelon today.
This is red.
Summertime
Isn't this red?
slice. It's like a
It is
watermelon
watermelon?
red. That's my
Oh,
guess.
okay.
But we kind
All
of
right.
match, which is cute. Like
Well,
I got
I
the
don't
red
know
writing.
about that, but I didn't plan that.
I know, we never do. Even though we dress within a few feet of each other. So
Yeah,
but
I ignore what you're doing. In fact, I ignore what you're doing right now.
Wow,
Well,
great.
no, I'm not. I love
awesome. What's new?
you. What's new? Wow.
Thanks for coming, folks. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about communication.
Yeah,
So we've been covering blended families. This will be our last show today on blending families, but
Right.
we are so stoked because next week we're going to be talking about a very hot topic that's out there right now and actually has been for a while, but always relevant, and that's boundaries and having margin in your life. So be sure to stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we've got some unique teaching. I actually wrote on this in a book that will be published here pretty soon, but we wrote on this. And there's some things about boundaries and margin I'll bet you don't know, at least our perspective. So Kimberly's taught on it, and
Yeah.
I'm excited. We're excited to share that. So we're going to get into
and
that.
I feel like if these are the things I would say to my 20-something-year-old
Yes.
self when I got married and started having children, that I wish I could have heard and implemented very early on. So we are hoping and praying that you'll join us and let some friends know because it's going to be really
we're going to look
good.
at it from a biblical perspective as well as psychological and social
Yes.
perspective. So we'll get into that. This week we're going to talk about, as we've been talking about blended families, our last one. Here's our anchor passage, Ephesians 4:1 through 3. Now there's more that we could expand into that. A powerful passage, and Ephesians talks about some really great things. But before you go any farther, when it talks about blended families, you need to find peace. So listen to this. As a prisoner of the Lord, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling which you have been called. That's verse 1. And that calling is to be united together in the bond of peace. I'll get to that. Watch this. Verse 2. With all humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. So the reason we chose this as our anchor passage is because we see those four attitudes that are crucial. Humility, which means to have a lowliness of mind. Somebody without an agenda, somebody that can defer to other
Yes.
people. I have a trouble with that.
Well, we all
But,
do.
Yeah. No, you don't. You're pretty good at it. No, what do you have to say? Never mind.
I defer to you.
Yeah, there's humility just is, it's a challenge. Anyway, and then to be gentle and kind of this, it's that word meekness, which is that a tempered heart, one that is unaffected, so we're not reacting all the time. Then patience, we talked about last time, slow to react. This kind of, it literally means take a long time before your passions boil over. And then this week is tolerance. He says, bearing with one another in love. The word bearing with, those two words, come from a word that means to endure another person. So it's
Endure
really,
another person.
it really has to do with
Suck it up, buttercup.
yeah, this idea of people have idiosyncrasies. There are things that you do
That drive you crazy.
that bug me. There are things that I do, probably more things that I do that bug you. Like even here, just an example. We change the sheets. We do that every 3 years, whether we need to or not. Anyway, we change the sheets on our bed. And when we're changing the sheets, we're tucking in that fitted sheet, and she does it, and then I come around and redo it.
A recheck, because I haven't been making any beds apparently in my 53 years on this planet. So
Yeah, and I do that actually with the dishwasher too. So the kids, no, doesn't matter who does the dishwasher, it really needs to be reorganized before you start it.
Yes,
So if I get a
Tim.
chance to reorganize, I'm going to do it right.
Since you brought
Tolerance.
all of this up, I'm going to say yes, those are definitely things that bug.
Well, I brought something. It's this. So we are Chick-fil-A. They are sponsoring this podcast. Actually, they're not sponsoring this podcast.
Maybe they
But
can.
maybe they'll have to now. Maybe we'll see if we can bill
We're
them for
wearing
this.
Chick-fil-A colors today.
So, my question to you is this: if you order, how many of you do Uber Eats? Do you do Uber Eats? We do Uber
if they're
Eats. 'Cause
smart, they do.
Uber Eats is like the next level laziness, I think. But whatever. Anyway, we do Uber Eats, and if you're not aware of it, you can
On
get your
occasion.
account on occasion,
Yeah.
and then you order what you want. Then they bring it to you. It only costs like $1.50 or something. Then you give them a tip, and
Yeah.
anyway, whatever. And but my question is, when the Uber Eats driver comes to your house, do they eat your fries on the way? Because I know I eat the fries on the way, and the proof of that is this.
Busted.
So we had, before this podcast today, we actually had Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And in the Chick-fil-A, we had
You
you
went
know,
to go get it for us.
I
Let's
went
say
and got
that. We
it
didn't
out of
Uber
the
Eats it.
kindness
Right.
and love of my heart. And then on the way back, I may or may not, I cannot confirm or deny that I may have eaten some of these on the way back.
Let me just show these.
But
I want to show this. This
was
is
a
the
large-
container, a large container. The container was to here with fries when he got back.
I'm serious.
And then he had the audacity to tell me I had two.
I did. They were large, but I
Yeah,
had
they were
two.
potatoes, if that's
Yeah.
true. They were
Yeah.
whole potatoes.
I'm serious. No, I'm not lying right now. But so Kimberly, who is quite tolerant most of the time, kind of goes like this. She had a couple of these fries. We share them. We don't eat big ones.
We
'cause
share them.
we're
Those are air
We're healthy
quotes.
people.
Air
all right.
quotes.
All right. Anyway, whatever. So we're eating these, and she goes, "So you just two, Tim?" And she's kind of scolding me like I'm 5. And then she goes, "You just had two?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I had two on the way." I admit they were large, but I mean, there should be a lot of these in here because we've got
There
the
should
large.
be. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I
So
feel like
then she takes, and I go, "Honey, have the rest of these." And she goes, "No, you eat them." And I said I wouldn't eat the last one. And so she left it on the table because she's intolerant and angry at me. I'm just saying.
I'm not.
You
I'm
eat that
not
fry.
mad about it. I'm just sad, Tim. I'm just
Sad.
really sad
Yeah.
about it. I'm grieving.
You're appalled. You're appalled at my bad behavior.
I'm
That's
appalled that you said you took 2 fries and they were clearly cleared out.
right. No.
But anyway, so
Hell.
yeah, those are.
So that's something you need to know for a blended
Yeah.
family.
I feel better just talking about
Yeah.
it. I feel like we've had some therapy. Thank you. Thank
I'm,
you.
I'm a little weak on the tolerance. We'll admit that. On the big things, we talked about this last week as it relates to patience. Again, with tolerance, the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
I'm tolerant of, like, when there's a major crisis.
Oh my gosh, you're the
when
man.
there's health
Yes.
problems
Yeah.
or somebody wrecks the car. I'm very
Solid.
tolerant
Yeah.
and I don't react, and I'm kind of the right guy to go to. But then if they park to the left of where they're supposed to park
Yes.
in our driveway, and it's harder for me to get out, I'm a little intolerant.
Yes.
Am I?
Doors may be slammed.
Maybe.
They may be
I
slammed.
don't know.
Yes.
But when you're raising children in a blended family and when you're trying to love people in a blended family, tolerance is critical. So humility, gentleness, patience, tolerance. If you didn't get these podcasts, go back and look at those or listen to those. And I think they'll be helpful for you. So go ahead. What do
So
you have
in
to say?
blending families, in the season we've been in the last several years, we're blended. In the home, we had adult children,
Right.
which brings its own unique challenges. And I say adult, some of them semi-adult, some of them have circled back
their
after
20s.
school and education, and that's very common these days
Yeah.
because it's expensive to live independently. So we've learned that that's a challenge. And one of the things why are you laughing?
I'm just thinking of Malachi. Malachi, we had the rules. He's what, about 19 or 20 or whatever it
At the
is.
time, yeah.
At the time, and he's not now. Yeah. And he goes, look, I think I'm moving out, guys. I go, why? Why are you moving out? I just don't want the rules.
Don't
I'm
want the
just
rules.
Don't want these
Yes.
rules. So then he moves out and he realizes he's got to pay for all the food. He's got to pay for, and then they've got house rules there. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And then they come back to borrow things like,
and eat you out of house and a home.
And
And gel.
Yeah,
That's why my hair's messed up. I'm having a bad hair day because my
right.
son Malachi
I realized
took
they
it.
had it pretty good with those rules and all the amenities of being home. But yeah, it's challenging. And I think one of the things I will say is when they circle back after going away to university or job training or whatever it is, the reasons why kids go and then come home. It's tough. And I don't know if you ever did this, Tim, but I know I did. It's tough being independent as a child and then coming home back into the setting of home and with those old rules. And we learned you have to adjust. You have to adjust those rules and flex because they have come into a new sense of independence.
Well, yeah, you can't put on an adult. You can't put. But so when I left the home, I left when I was 17, and I never came back because they wouldn't let me. No, I got married as a teenager and started a family and started pastoring, went to graduate school and all of that. So there was no opportunity to come back. But our kids, as they've come back, it has been a challenge, and you have to have a level of tolerance.
Yes.
That they're going to, when they're in the home, they're going to act more like kids than when they're adults living on their own.
Right.
But they have adult sensibilities, and you have to have some tolerance for them if you want it to be a happy environment.
Right.
So
everybody has to have tolerance with each other.
One of the things that came up as we've been doing these podcasts is people saying, well, we have a blended family. Usually blended families are larger than nuclear family, the original family. Because if you have two, I was talking to Sophie before this, and she was saying that she grew up in a family. I should ask her now, but she won't answer. So she's sitting right there. I think it's 5 or 6, 5? 5 total. She's being very quiet. 5 total. But she was born into that, which is a whole different thing. Her and her brother were born into that. So she never knew anything else. So blending for her was not the challenge. Blending for her siblings might have been, and blending for her parents might have been. Right. But what do you think if you go into a family and you were a family of 2 kids, your mom and dad divorce, now your mom remarries a man, and there's the 2 of you, and he has 4 kids that are coming in. Now you're 6 children and 2 parents, and then you got your dad who's by himself or whatever. So this large family presents a special level of a need for tolerance, because the bigger the family, the more raucous they're going to be, the more wild they're going to be, the more people are going to feel left out. Sure. So they're going to tribe up, even though. So that's why we talked about traditions. That's why it's so important to have traditions where nobody's left out. Yeah. You are really good at that. I think I am too, is where we get the kids to realize that when they are, struggling and trying to find their voice, when we have a dinner where everybody gets to speak, they have a voice, and everybody has to listen. Yeah. Even if I have to shush everybody down to get them to listen to the one who's the quietest. So it takes tolerance.
And for us with 7 children on our family nights, that's a lot of personalities. And obviously, as we know, even in nuclear families that are not blended, you can have 5 kids in one family, or even 3. They are all going to come out totally unique. You raise them the same way, and their personalities are completely unique. So you're dealing with, in a blended family, not just the unique personalities, but the unique culture of the home that they came from. So it potentially could be like a family in a blender instead of a blended family, as we've talked about in the past. Yeah. And it's certainly challenging. But the key is communication and learning to talk through the issues. I think the culture in a lot of homes is to ignore and put your head in the sand and not confront lovingly a situation. That's key, is lovingly, because there can be a culture of confrontation which can blow up a home. But a lot of times it's learned in the home to shut down and be quiet, to create peace, quote unquote, when really hearts aren't being heard and touched, and there's not that connection being made. So intentional conversation, we call them crucial conversations with each other, where you're leading with love and affirmation, you're listening well, and you're not going into it to try to just make your point, but to listen and then have an opportunity to be heard.
Yeah. This, we've talked about the difficulty of blending kids. One of the things I was just thinking while you're talking, kids, let's say that you are in a home where you have your own bedroom. You're a child, you have your own bedroom, and your brother has his own bedroom, and then you blend with another family, and now you've got to share your room with somebody who maybe is not even your your biological sibling, but now you've got, and maybe that's a cool thing for some kids. It might, if you like that kid, and
I think it can be.
yeah, but you have got to learn tolerance. We shared throughout this series that 67% of blended families fail. And why do those blended families fail? And I think it's because the kids don't know how to tolerate and the parents don't know how to tolerate. And this lack of tolerance creates this tension and this conflict that is very difficult. So one of the things you had mentioned, Crucial Conversations, one of my favorite books on communication. And
who's the author of that? Just so we can put that out there.
There's several authors. Carey something. I've forgotten his name.
Look it up. Google it. Crucial Conversations. You'll find it. It's a secular book. Not in the Christian necessarily circles.
Yeah, but it's the best book on communication. One of the sections, it talks about this principle called STATE, STATE, and how you go through this process. And I won't deal with the whole thing because we just don't have time to deal with that. But if you want to learn tolerance, you slow down the conversation by, first of all, the first thing is you share your facts, not your opinions, but your facts. This happened. This is a fact we can agree on.
Yeah.
So you share your fact. Then you tell your journey. So you got S is share your fact. T of state is tell your journey. I'm beginning to believe this based on these facts, and only you can correct it. Right. And then A is ask for their journey. How did they get to where they are? All of a sudden, what happens is the conversation becomes less hostile and almost gets philosophical. It gets to the point where, oh, okay, those are the facts. This is the journey I'm on. This is the journey you're on. And the last two are STAT is talk tentatively. So you don't talk forcefully. One of the things I talk in declarative statements. I'm very direct. I'm very dogmatic, and it works pretty well in a monologue. Doesn't work great in a conversation. Yeah. But when you tell your facts and your journey, you talk tentatively. And then the E of state is you expect testing. So expect testing to your facts. Expect testing to your journey. This creates a working together with children, working together in marriage. Those of you who are married, those of you who are dating, use that state principle. And you might forget it, so just look up STATE, all capital letters, STATE, and Crucial Conversations. It will really be helpful to you. I've used it many times with Kimberly, and I've used it many times with people with whom I knew there was going to be a conflict. We don't have a lot of conflicts, but because she's more tolerant than me, to be honest with you. So that's, I think that it's one of the things is a key factor in holding the family together is learning how to communicate with respect and speak more about facts than you do about opinions. I think that will help your conversations be much healthier.
Right. Exactly. We've intentionally pursued also over the past 13 years to not necessarily perfectly, but spend time when possible with my ex-husband, the ex-spouses.
Yeah. Mine was gone, passed, so she's in heaven, and you had one. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like that has been a beautiful example to the kids of tolerance because now I want to put a caveat in here. Obviously, if there are situations where there is abuse and unhealthy toxic relationships, we don't recommend this, and certainly we don't encourage that you bring them into your home or vice versa. But for us, our home, quickly became solid with our blended kids, and we began to feel compelled to lead by example with our kids, that you can disagree with someone and maybe some of their choices and still love them and respect them as a person and include them in family. So,
yeah, one of the things, there will be seasons. So, not getting into too much detail, but there was a time where that was not possible for
Right,
us to
early
do
on.
that. So there was a season at which we didn't feel it would be appropriate to have that kind of connection. We did still have some around birthdays and so forth,
Sure.
but now it's become very common to have your ex-husband come into the family environment. He's
And us in
comfortable
his
there
home.
and
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
home. So we become friends. We don't agree on a lot of things, but that doesn't matter.
We
don't
choose
really
to focus
emphasize
on the things we emphasize the things we do.
And there's
Yeah.
a lot of cultural things that
Yeah.
we enjoy talking about. And he's brilliant and very funny and highly talented. And so it's really fun to see that kind of environment. And I think it takes tolerance to make that happen, though.
Yeah, and what that did was took the pressure off of the children in that tension of feeling it's us and them kind of thing. When they saw us in those situations where we were bridging that relationship intentionally and made it okay, it made it okay for them to feel love for everybody, to
Yeah.
feel safe with everybody. When you're putting a hard, fast line and you're like on a battlefield and there's us and there's whatever, quote unquote, the bad guys on the other side. But, through that can happen often in the battleground of divorce. It
Yeah.
can become ugly. And what it does is it breaks down those barriers and you become, like we mentioned earlier, a team.
Yeah.
Raising the same little tribe.
So I've noticed, and I don't know what happened, but a short while ago, I started getting a lot of friend requests on Facebook, and went from, I don't know how many I
Doesn't
had,
matter.
but to just
A lot.
I mean, hundreds and hundreds of them. And the reason I bring that up is because what happened was there's a lot of people with whom I disagree that are now on my friends base. And the beauty is, from a ministry standpoint, is that I can reach out my perspective, and they can tolerate some of the things I do, but and I can tolerate some of the things they do. But then there's some people who are intolerant, and they will say really cruel things on social media. And we've had, Kimberly calls them trolls,
Yeah.
and we've had
Everybody
our
calls
share
them
of
trolls.
trolls. Oh, is that?
Yes, that's
okay,
a
I'm
thing.
an old guy. I don't know these things. So anyway, these trolls that would get on there, and maybe you've had these too, and they just start slamming you based on their doctrinal views, their biblical views, or their worldview, or their
Or just your haircut.
haircut or whatever.
It's really true.
And I can tell you, the world becomes less enjoyable. Your world becomes less enjoyable when you try to force your values on other people. And what I've learned is, in watching on social media, as well as just in church, in different areas of walks of life, anytime you interact with people, you're going to need tolerance, and no less. You need that tolerance in the home when you have a blended family.
For sure.
yeah.
Yep. And all of these, I'm thinking about all of these principles. This really applies to any relationship. It's
Yeah.
not about blended
Right.
families, where that tends to be obviously our focal point, but for marriage, for friendships,
Right.
all of those things, these are just some solid truths. I want to read this amazing quote from Ruth Graham. She was relating it, I believe, to marriage, but I think this really works well with families. It says, a successful family or marriage is made up of good forgivers. Conflicts will arise. Have your disagreements and forgive. The objective here is not to win, it is to resolve. If you go in to win, you'll lose even if you win. Isn't that good?
Yeah,
So
it's
that
very
that whole
convicting.
tolerance thing
Yeah.
is throughout that that big quote of wisdom there, because it's so important that tolerance and forgiveness go hand in hand, don't they? It's very important.
Right. What's that saying you talk about chaos, that children raised in chaos?
Children raised in chaos become adults that live in chaos. Try to give your child a childhood they don't have to heal from.
Yeah, because I mean, think about if I've seen people that were raised in homes that everything was in disarray, and that's how their house is, and the way they talk, the way they treat each other, yelling at each other, families that allow kids to yell at each other and rudely talk to each other. That's a problem because when they become adults, they're going to do that not only with their kids and their family, they're going to do that with other people at work.
Right.
So the way you raise your children today is going to impact the way they are as adults, at least temporarily until they get their rear ends kicked by other people going, this is intolerable. This is their 5th job you've been fired from because you can't get along with people. Tolerance is a key thing. So let me just share these before I close. Here are the 4 things that we've learned out of Ephesians 4 about a blended family. We need humility. We need gentleness. We need patience. And we need tolerance. And the goal of this is to maintain the unity of that family, of that blended family, of that nuclear family, of that marriage in the spirit and the bond of peace. We want peace in our relationships. I can tell you, the greater the degree of peace, the greater the degree of intimacy. Because when there's chaos, when there's conflict, it ruins intimacy. You want to get rid of fear so you can have beautiful intimacy with your blended family. And I hope if you have any questions, send them to us. We'd love to respond to those. But also next week we start. That concludes our study of blended family. Next week, as Kimberly mentioned at the top of this podcast, we're going to be talking about boundaries. We're going to be talking about margin. We're going to be talking about how to deal with this. And some people feel so guilty about cutting some people out of their life that are creating an unhealthy or toxic environment for them. So we're going to talk about how to bridge all that. We're going to spend just a couple of, maybe 3 weeks on it, and really hope that you'll listen in. Invite your friends, maybe some friends of yours that are struggling with that themselves. Thanks for joining us on Hope Rescue podcast. And you can catch us on, if you're listening on iTunes or you're listening on your favorite podcast delivery system, you can go to YouTube and you can watch us if you would like to. And if you watch us for a little while and go, I didn't like it, then go back to the other one and just listen to us. Thanks for coming. God bless you. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.